The sky over Veralianine was a color no human had a name for. Pale silver swirled with faint streaks of green, and a cold wind blew across the barren landscape. Once, this planet had been full of life, cities with shining towers, forests that glimmered under twin suns, and oceans that sparkled with blue fire. But war had changed everything. Ships lay broken in the deserts, their metal twisted and burned. Strange creatures, once proud and strong, were gone. The silence was absolute. Among the ruins, lying half-buried in the sand, was Lyra. Her skin, silver blue like the twilight sky, reflected the dim sunlight, but it had lost its glow. Her limbs were stiff and trembling, and her breathing came in shallow, uneven gasps. Her ship, a small scout vessel, had crashed days ago, leaving her stranded in a place where no one would come. She looked at the horizon, where the wreckage of her home fleet floated like broken toys in orbit, and a bitter loneliness filled her chest. She tried to push herself up, but her body refused. Every movement sent sharp jolts of pain through her arms and legs. Her eyes wandered over the debris around her scorched metal, shattered crystals, and fragments of devices she could not recognize. Every piece reminded her of what she had lost: family, friends, and the people who had once called her one of their own. A soft gust of wind swept across the wasteland, carrying dust and the faint smell of ozone. Lyra shivered, wrapping her thin cloak around herself. She whispered to herself, almost as if speaking aloud could change her fate. So this is how it ends. Alone, her voice was faint, trembling. Yet it carried a strange courage, the courage of someone who had fought through battles and survived impossible odds, only to face the silence of a world that did not care. Her eyelids grew heavy. She felt the warmth of life fading from her body. The cold wind pressed against her skin, each gust a reminder that her time was short. Lyra closed her eyes, letting her mind drift. She thought of her home, of the bright towers and the laughter that once filled them. She thought of her people leaving orbit without her, the stars swallowing their ships as if she had never existed. And she let herself believe that death was near, that the darkness would come and end her suffering. And then she felt something impossible. A hand. Strong, warm, human. It brushed against her shoulder, steady and insistent. Lyra's eyes snapped open. For a moment, she saw only a blur, the swirling dust and the faint outline of a figure standing over her. But as her vision cleared, she saw a human. A man in a spacesuit, his helmet cracked and scratched, but his eyes shining with life. He looked at her with determination, not fear, not hesitation. "Don't move," he said softly. "You're going to be okay." His voice was calm, confident, and strangely comforting. Lyra stared at him, disbelief and confusion mingling in her mind. Humans were supposed to be reckless, unpredictable, dangerous. Yet here was one risking his life to save someone, a stranger, an alien, abandoned and alone. Her heart, heavy with sorrow, felt a flicker of something she had not felt in days. Hope, the human, carefully knelt beside her, checking her injuries. His hands moved with precision, despite the makeshift gloves of his suit. He lifted her gently, careful not to hurt her further. Lyra's body was weak, but she clung to consciousness, her mind trying to understand what was happening. Who are you?" she asked, her voice barely above a whisper. The human smiled faintly, though exhaustion lined his face. "Name's Ryan. Captain Ryan Cole," he replied. "Explorer. Rescue team. I guess you could call me that. Didn't think I'd find anyone alive here." Lyra's mind raced. Her people would have left her to die without a second thought. Yet this human had found her, had risked his life in a place filled with dangers she could only guess at. For reasons she could not understand, he was there, and he would not let her die. Ryan lifted her higher, supporting her fragile body as they began to move across the desolate land. Every step was difficult. Rocks and debris tore at their boots, and the wind lashed against them like a living creature. Lyra felt her body shaking from pain and exhaustion, but she also felt something she had thought impossible: safety. For the first time in days, she was no longer alone. Where are we going?" she asked, struggling to keep her voice steady. Ryan glanced at her, a faint smile in his eyes despite the grim situation. "To my shuttle. It's not much, but it'll keep you alive long enough for me to figure out the rest." The wind howled around them, but Ryan's movements were sure, guided by experience and determination. He carried her like she weighed nothing, his steps steady over the uneven terrain. Every now and then, he would glance around, alert to movement, to danger, to anything that could threaten them. Lyra watched him, her mind filled with questions she could not yet voice. Why would he care? Why risk so much? And yet, with every step, she felt the warmth of life returning to her. Finally, they reached the shuttle, a small, rugged vessel built for survival rather than comfort. Ryan carefully placed Lyra inside, covering her with a thermal blanket that glowed faintly with warmth. The cabin smelled faintly of fuel and metal, but it was safe. It was shelter. For a moment, Lyra simply lay there, staring at the ceiling, feeling her body grow calmer as the warmth seeped in. Ryan sat beside her, his helmet removed now, revealing his face. His hair was dark and tousled, his skin marked by scratches and burns from their journey. Yet his eyes held something that few humans possessed: unwavering resolve. "You're lucky I found you," he said quietly, almost to himself. Could have been too late. Lyra's mind struggled to process everything. She had always thought of humans as unpredictable, sometimes reckless, sometimes cruel. Yet here was one who had risked everything for a stranger. She had been abandoned by her own people, left to die on a forgotten world. And yet, despite all of that, he had found her. I don't understand," she murmured. "Why? Help me." Ryan shrugged, though there was no hesitation in his movements. "You're alive. That's reason enough." Lyra studied him, trying to see past the human confidence to understand the heart beneath it. She had seen courage before, in her fleet, in the warriors who fought beside her. But this was different. This was quiet, patient, selfless courage, the kind that did not rely on weapons or ships, only on the choice to keep moving forward when everything seemed lost. Outside, the wind continued to roar, bending the shuttle under its force. But inside, Lyra felt a strange calm. For the first time since the crash, she dared to hope. Hours passed in silence, broken only by the soft hum of the shuttle's systems and the occasional creak of metal. Lyra rested, her body slowly recovering. Ryan kept a watchful eye on the instruments, checking the ship's condition and plotting a safe course off the planet. Every now and then, he would glance at her, ensuring she was stable, breathing. Still alive in the quiet moments, Lyra thought about her people, about the fleet that had abandoned her. She realized that hope was not a gift her people had given her. It had come from this human, from someone who had acted without expectation, without command, simply because it was the right thing to do. When she finally spoke again, her voice was steadier. "Ryan, you don't know what this means. You could have left me." He shook his head, smiling faintly. "And let you die? Not a chance. Humans don't give up on life that easily. We see it as worth saving." Lyra thought about that word, worthiness. Her people had left her because they saw her as expendable. Yet here was a human who saw her as valuable, simply because she was alive. The thought was strange, unfamiliar, but comforting. She closed her eyes again, this time not out of despair, but to rest, to regain strength. And for the first time since the crash, Lyra felt that maybe she had not been abandoned completely. Maybe, just maybe, she could survive this world after all, not because of her technology, not because of her people, but because of one human who refused to let her die. As the shuttle prepared to lift off, the pale Varelianine landscape stretched out below them, desolate and silent. Yet in that small cabin there was life. There was warmth. There was hope. And for Lyra, that hope was enough to keep her eyes open, her heart beating, and her spirit alive. The shuttle's interior was quiet except for the faint hum of the engines and the rhythmic beeping of the life support systems. Lyra lay on a narrow medical cot, the warmth of the thermal blanket surrounding her like a cocoon. She could feel her body slowly regaining strength, each breath easier than the last. The ache in her limbs and the sting of burns were still there. reminders of the crash and the days she had spent stranded on Varelia 9, but they no longer seemed unbearable. Ryan sat across from her, his back resting against the shuttle wall, carefully checking the instruments. Every so often he glanced at Lyra, his expression a mixture of concern and quiet determination. Though he appeared calm, there was no mistaking the exhaustion etched into his face. The scratches, burns, and dirt on his armor told their own story. He had survived the harsh planet, navigated the wreckage, and carried Lyra to safety despite his own injuries. Lyra studied him, fascinated and confused. Her people had always seen humans as reckless and primitive. They were curious, daring, sometimes reckless to the point of foolishness. But this one human, he was nothing like she expected. He was careful, precise, and fiercely protective, risking everything for someone he had just met. That simple act of care was alien to her, and yet it moved her in ways she could not explain. "Why? Why do you help me?" she finally asked, her voice weak but steady. Ryan looked at her and gave a small, faint smile. "Because you're alive. And alive is worth saving." Lyra blinked, processing his words. Her people had abandoned her without a second thought, leaving her to die on a cold, lifeless planet. Yet this human, a complete stranger, had risked everything just to keep her alive. It was not command, not duty, not reward, just simple, undeniable compassion. She had always thought such things were myths, stories told to make people believe in something better than themselves. But now, sitting here with Ryan, she realized it was real. For hours. Lyra drifted between consciousness and sleep, Ryan sitting silently, keeping a watchful eye. Every now and then, he would reach over to adjust her blanket or check her vitals. Each gesture, no matter how small, made her heart beat a little faster. She had expected loneliness, despair, and abandonment, but instead, she found safety and care. By the time the shuttle's engines had stabilized, Lyra felt strong enough to sit up. Ryan helped her, supporting her with a gentle but firm grip. She noticed the way he moved, cautious but deliberate, as though every action had purpose. There was no panic, no hesitation, only determination. She could see why humans survived in the harshest places in the galaxy. They did not give up easily. "Even when the odds were stacked against them, your injuries are healing faster than I expected," Ryan said, noticing her alertness. "You must have strong resilience, or stubbornness, or both." Lyra let out a faint laugh, the sound almost foreign in the quiet shuttle. "Perhaps. Or perhaps I simply do not wish to die on this forgotten world." Her eyes met his, flicker of gratitude and something deeper shining within them. As the shuttle drifted away from the planet, leaving the broken cities and desert ruins behind, Ryan spoke again. "Tell me about your people," he said quietly. "Why were you alone?" Lyra hesitated. Her people were private, proud, and cautious about sharing personal stories with outsiders. But there was something about Ryan, the calm strength, the refusal to judge, the simple desire to help, that made her trust him. Slowly, she began to speak. "My people." "Left," she said, her voice trembling. "Our fleet retreated from the war. My ship was damaged, and I could not follow. They did not come back. They abandoned me." Ryan listened, his expression thoughtful, his eyes steady. "I see," he said quietly. "I don't pretend to understand your people's choices, but I know this. Being left behind does not mean you're worthless. Sometimes the ones left behind are the ones who survive, and maybe even find a new way forward." Lyra considered his words. In her culture, survival often depended on strength, hierarchy, and loyalty to the group. Yet here was a human, alone in the stars, risking his life to save someone he barely knew. His survival, his courage, and his compassion were all proof of something different. Something she had never fully understood. Humanity's strength did not always come from power or numbers, but from the refusal to give up, the choice to care. The shuttle hummed as it glided through the upper atmosphere. Moving toward the nearest human outpost, Lyra leaned back, exhausted but thoughtful. She had expected solitude, despair, and death. Instead, she had found care, compassion, and hope. As they approached a safer zone, the shuttle's systems began to falter. Sparks flew from the panels, and the lights flickered. Ryan frowned and quickly tapped commands on the console. But it was clear the shuttle had sustained damage during their landing and the journey through the planet's atmosphere. "This is going to be tricky," Ryan said, his voice calm but focused. "We need the reactors stable before we can reach the outpost." Lyra looked around the shuttle, her eyes falling on a small glowing crystal embedded in her suit, a fragment of alien technology. It was a piece of her people's knowledge, capable of generating immense energy. She hesitated. Her instincts screamed at her to keep it safe, to preserve it as a relic of her lost civilization. But looking at Ryan, at the human who had risked everything to save her, she realized something. Sometimes survival required trust. "I can help," she said softly, holding out the crystal. "It can power the shuttle, at least temporarily." Ryan's eyes widened slightly. "Are you sure? That's your people's technology. You'd lose it forever." "I've already lost everything," she replied. "If it can help you, it's worth it." Together, they worked on the shuttle's systems. Ryan guided her hands, teaching her the sequence to redirect energy, while Lyra provided the raw power of her crystal. Sparks and hums filled the cabin, and for a tense moment the shuttle shuddered under the strain. Lyra's heart pounded, fear and hope tangled together. Then, slowly the engines roared back to life. The lights stabilized, the hum became steady, and the shuttle was ready to continue. Lyra leaned back, relief washing over her. She had expected despair, danger, and perhaps death, but instead, she had found a human who taught her trust, hope, and courage. Ryan smiled at her, a tired but genuine expression. "Not bad for a first attempt," he said lightly, though his eyes shone with admiration. "You're full of surprises, Lyra." For the first time since she had landed on Varelia 9, Lyra felt something deeper than survival. She felt connection. She felt respect. And most importantly, she felt hope. Humanity, she realized, was not just reckless wanderers or primitive beings. They were capable of courage, compassion, and determination. And sometimes that made all the difference in the universe. Hours passed as the shuttle drifted through space, Lyra resting while Ryan monitored the course. When she awoke, she noticed the stars stretching endlessly outside the window, cold and distant, yet full of possibilities. For the first time, she allowed herself to imagine a future, not one dictated by fear, abandonment, or loss, but by choice, courage, and perhaps even friendship. "You know," she said quietly, her voice thoughtful, "my people might never understand this. Your actions, your choices, they might see them as reckless." Ryan shrugged, smiling faintly. "Maybe, but I don't act for approval. I act because it's right, and sometimes that's enough." Lyra nodded, a small smile forming on her lips. For all her training, all her experience, all her knowledge of survival, she had never seen anything like this. Humans did not always fight wars with power or weapons. Sometimes they fought with their hearts, with their choices, and with their refusal to give up on life even when the universe seemed determined to take it away. As the shuttle continued its journey, Lyra realized something remarkable. She had expected to die alone on a forgotten world. Instead, she had been saved by a human, a stranger who saw her as worthy of life. And in that simple act, she had discovered the true meaning of hope, resilience, and the strength of humanity. And though the journey ahead was uncertain, she knew one thing for certain: as long as humans like Ryan existed, there was always a chance for survival, a chance for trust, and a chance to find light even in the darkest corners of the galaxy. For the first time in days, Lyra smiled fully, not out of relief, but out of recognition. Humanity, she realized, was a force unlike any other, not because of its strength or technology, but because it never abandoned hope. And in that small shuttle drifting among the stars, Lyra felt the first spark of life, trust, and perhaps even friendship, ready to grow into something greater as their journey continued. The shuttle hummed steadily as it glided through the vast emptiness of space. Stars stretched endlessly outside the window, cold and distant, but for Lyra, they seemed less like a void and more like possibilities. She had spent days on Veralia 9 expecting nothing but death and loneliness. Now, with Ryan by her side, she felt something entirely new. Hope. Ryan sat at the controls, scanning navigation data and adjusting the ship's trajectory. The console lights reflected in his determined eyes, and though he moved with care, there was an energy about him that spoke of experience, courage, and an unyielding will. Lyra watched him for a moment, marveling at the simplicity of his purpose. He did not need admiration, respect, or reward. He helped because it was right. "You move fast," she said softly, breaking the silence. "It's even after everything." Ryan glanced at her and gave a small grin. "You get used to it. In space, if you hesitate, you die. And sometimes, you help someone along the way." Lyra considered this carefully. Humans, she realized, had a strange kind of resilience. They survived not because they were the strongest or the smartest, but because they refused to stop, refused to give up. They fought for life itself, and sometimes for others, even strangers. Her people had abandoned her because they saw survival as something for the many, not the few. But Ryan, he embodied a different truth. He saw the value of a single life. For the next few hours, Lyra rested while Ryan monitored the ship. She had regained much of her strength, enough to sit up, move, and think clearly. When she finally felt capable, she approached him. "There is something I can do," she said quietly.
How the shuttle systems are human-made, yes, but with my knowledge, we can improve efficiency, perhaps even repair damages more quickly.
Ryan raised an eyebrow, curiosity flickering in his eyes. "You know how to do that?" Lyra nodded. "I studied energy matrices and alien propulsion systems. I can integrate some of my technology with yours safely, but I will need your cooperation." Ryan leaned back in his chair, studying her. "Sounds like a plan. Let's see what you've got." Together, they worked side by side. Lyra guided her hands with care, showing Ryan how to adjust the energy flow, stabilize the shield generators, and improve the shuttle's propulsion output. Sparks danced across panels and consoles, but under Lyra's guidance, nothing went wrong. She felt a sense of purpose returning, spark of life she thought she had lost forever. As the hours passed, Ryan watched her in quiet admiration. This alien, abandoned and alone just days ago, was now working beside him as an equal. He realized something profound. Survival was not just about strength or skill, but about the ability to adapt, to learn, and to trust. The shuttle's systems hummed with renewed power. The lights steadied, the engines ran smoothly, and for the first time since their journey began, the ship felt truly alive. Lyra smiled faintly, satisfaction shining in her eyes. She had not only survived, she had contributed. She had proved to herself, and perhaps to Ryan, that she still had value, that life was worth fighting for. "Good work," Ryan said, clapping her gently on the shoulder. "You've made this ship better than it was. It's faster, stronger, more efficient. Impressive for a beginner." Lyra tilted her head, studying him. You trust me?" Ryan shrugged. "I trust people who want to live. You've already proven that." For the first time since her ship had crashed, Lyra felt a warmth that had nothing to do with the thermal blankets. It was trust, respect, and perhaps even a sense of belonging. She had expected loneliness, despair, and betrayal. Instead, she found companionship, understanding, and courage reflected in the eyes of a human. As the shuttle traveled deeper into space, Ryan set a course toward the nearest inhabited planet. Lyra leaned back in her seat, her mind wandering over everything that had happened. The world she had thought dead and empty now seemed filled with possibilities. She could survive, she could learn, she could even hope. But the universe is never truly quiet. A sudden alarm broke the calm. Red lights flashed across the shuttle's control panels, accompanied by a sharp, insistent beep. Ryan's eyes narrowed as he scanned the console. "Raider fleet," he said calmly but firmly. "They're following a salvage signal. Looks like they found our location." Lyra's heart raced. Edgers were scavengers, dangerous even to ships much stronger than theirs. Their weapons were crude but effective, and their ships were fast and numerous. She felt a familiar fear creeping in, but Ryan's calm presence steadied her. "We can't outrun them," he continued. "Our shuttle isn't built for combat, but we can try something else. You know their technology better than I do. Can you help me?" Lyra hesitated, then nodded. "Yes, I can create a false signature, a decoy. It will confuse their sensors, at least for a short time." Ryan's eyes lit up with hope. "Perfect. Let's do it." Working together, they rerouted the shuttle's energy through Lyra's alien crystal, projecting a distorted signal that made the shuttle appear as a derelict wreck. The Raiders' sensors picked up the signal, and their fleet changed course toward the phantom wreckage. For a moment, Lyra held her breath, praying that the deception would work. It worked. The Raider fleet veered away, chasing the false target. The shuttle was safe for now. Lyra exhaled, a mix of relief and pride flooding her. She had used her knowledge not for survival alone, but to protect them both. She was no longer helpless. She was a contributor, a partner. Ryan looked at her, admiration clear in his eyes. "You're amazing," he said. "You saved us." Lyra shook her head. "No, you saved me too, and we did this together." For hours, the shuttle continued its journey, now moving cautiously through space. Lyra and Ryan talked quietly, sharing stories about their pasts, their cultures, and their dreams. Lyra learned about the human desire to help, to explore, and to fight for life, even when hope seemed distant. She realized that humans were capable of acts far greater than her people had ever shown. They were unpredictable, yes, but also resilient, compassionate, and clever. As night, or what passed for night in the cabin, fell, Lyra looked out at the stars. The universe seemed endless, cold, and indifferent, but with Ryan at her side, she felt a spark of warmth. Perhaps survival was not just about escaping danger, but about finding the right companions to face it with. Days passed in this rhythm: travel, repair, learning, and cautious vigilance. Lyra grew stronger with each day, her skills blending seamlessly with Ryan's experience. Together, they formed a rhythm, a partnership built on trust and mutual respect. One evening, as they floated past a field of distant stars, Lyra spoke softly. "I never expected to find kindness in this universe, not like this." Ryan glanced at her, his expression gentle. "Kindness exists everywhere, Lyra. Some just have to look a little harder to find it." Lyra smiled faintly, a warmth in her chest she had not felt for a long time. She thought about the countless worlds she had traveled, the battles she had fought, and the people she had lost. And yet here was a human showing her that life was worth saving, that hope was still possible, and that one small choice to care could change everything. The shuttle hummed steadily, carrying them toward the unknown. Lyra realized that this journey was more than just survival. It was learning, growing, and discovering the strength of a species she had once underestimated. Humans were not perfect, but their courage and compassion made them extraordinary. And as the stars stretched endlessly before them, Lyra allowed herself to believe something she had never dared to before, that even in the cold emptiness of space, life could thrive, hope could endure, and bonds could form that transcended worlds, species, and the loneliness of the universe. For the first time in her life, she felt a sense of belonging, not because of her people, not because of her home, but because of one human who refused to give up, who believed in life, and who had shown her the power of trust. And in that knowledge, Lyra felt alive, truly alive, for the first time since the crash on Veralianine. The shuttle glided silently through space, its hull gleaming faintly in the distant light of a nearby star. The stars around them seemed peaceful, yet the calm was deceiving. Both Lyra and Ryan knew that danger was never far in a universe still recovering from war. Lyra leaned over a console, studying the sensors. Her alien eyes, adapted to detect energy signatures humans could not, flickered with concern. "Ryan, I see something. Not far from our path." Ryan leaned closer, scanning the data. His jaw tightened. "Raider fleet," he said grimly. "They must have followed us from the decoy we set back on Veralian 9. They're faster than we are, and they'll catch up if we don't act." Lyra's heart raced. The raiders were ruthless scavengers, using speed and numbers to overwhelm any ship they found. Their weapons were crude but devastating. She had heard of entire convoys being destroyed by such fleets. And now, they were heading straight for them. "What's our plan?" she asked, trying to steady her voice. Ryan's eyes scanned the instruments, calculating angles and probabilities. "We can't outrun them. Not in this shuttle. But we might be able to trick them, just like before." "I have an idea, but it's risky." Lyra nodded. "I trust you. Let's do it." Ryan's plan was simple but dangerous. They would use Lyra's alien energy crystal to project multiple false signals, creating phantom ships around them. Then, they would navigate a narrow canyon on a nearby asteroid field, hoping the raiders' sensors would be confused long enough for them to escape as they prepared. Lyra helped reroute the shuttle's energy. Her knowledge of alien technology allowed her to adjust the energy signatures to mimic larger, heavily armored ships. Sparks danced across the control panels as she worked, sweat beading on her forehead. Ryan monitored the course, ready to act at any moment. The raider fleet appeared on the sensors, dozens of ships forming a wedge behind them, closing in fast. Red warning lights flashed, and the shuttle's hull vibrated as their sensors locked onto their signal. "Now," Ryan said, his voice steady but urgent. Lyra activated the energy projection. Immediately, the shuttle's signature multiplied, creating the illusion of three massive ships. The raiders' sensors flickered in confusion. Some ships broke formation, chasing the phantoms, while others hesitated, unsure which ship to target. Ryan seized the moment. He pushed the shuttle into the asteroid field, weaving between jagged rocks and debris. The hull shook violently as they narrowly avoided collisions. Lyra gripped her seat, eyes wide. Following Ryan's movements with precision, the raiders pursued, firing plasma blasts that lit up the dark space around them. Sparks flew off the shuttle's shields and alarms screamed warnings. Yet Ryan remained calm, his hands steady on the controls. His focus absolute. "You can do this," Lyra whispered to herself, her heart pounding. "You can survive." As they dove deeper into the asteroid field, Ryan maneuvered the shuttle through narrow gaps, using the rocks as cover. Lyra's crystal flickered with energy, projecting the phantom ships, creating confusion among the raiders. One ship fired directly at them, but miscalculated the distance, crashing into an asteroid instead. "Perfect timing," Ryan muttered, a faint grin on his face. "Keep it steady, Lyra."
Hours felt like minutes as they navigated the treacherous field.
Lyra's heart raced, yet she marveled at Ryan's calm determination. No panic, no fear, only focus, strategy, and courage. She had seen courage in her people before, but this was different. Ryan's courage was not about fighting for honor or command. It was about survival, problem-solving, and protecting life, no matter the risk. Suddenly, a small drone from the raider fleet locked onto their energy signature. It fired a tracking beam directly at the shuttle. The shields shuddered under the impact. Lyra's hands moved instinctively, adjusting the crystal to distort the beam. Sparks shot across the cabin as the energy fluctuated dangerously. Ryan's voice was calm but commanding. "Hold on, we're almost through." The shuttle dove into a narrow crevice between two massive asteroids. The drone followed but miscalculated the width, colliding with the rocks in a bright explosion. The raider fleet faltered, their formation broken. Lyra exhaled, relief flooding her. We did it." Ryan smiled, though he did not let his guard down. "Not yet. Stay focused until we're clear of this field." Finally, after hours of tense navigation, they emerged from the asteroid field. The stars stretched before them, endless and calm. The raider fleet, confused and damaged, had lost their trail. For now, they were safe. Lyra looked at Ryan, awe shining in her eyes. You risked everything again." "For me?" Ryan shrugged lightly, though a faint smile curved his lips. "That's what humans do. We don't leave people behind if we can help it." Lyra's mind raced. She had expected abandonment, loneliness, and despair. Instead, she found courage, intelligence, and compassion in a human. A stranger who had shown her that life was worth fighting for. Even when the universe seemed determined to crush it, they continued their journey toward the nearest inhabited planet. Lyra worked alongside Ryan, helping with navigation and energy distribution, using her alien knowledge to make the shuttle more efficient. Their partnership was seamless now, relying on the other's strengths. As night fell, or what passed for night in the shuttle, Lyra reflected on everything she had learned. Humans were unpredictable, yes, but their courage, compassion, and determination made them extraordinary. They fought for life, for others, and for hope itself. Ryan had shown her that survival was not just about skill or strength, but about choices, the choice to act when it mattered most. Hours later, Lyra approached Ryan quietly. I don't know if my people could ever understand this. They might call it reckless. Ryan glanced at her, his expression calm but kind. Maybe, but I don't act for approval. I act because it's right, and sometimes that's enough. Lyra nodded, feeling a warmth she had not felt since the crash. She realized that hope, courage, and resilience were not just human traits, they were choices. And in Ryan, she had seen them embodied perfectly. For the first time, Lyra allowed herself to imagine the future. Not one dictated by fear, loss, or abandonment, but by choice, courage, and partnership. She could survive, learn, and even thrive. And perhaps, for the first time, she truly believed that life in the universe was not just about enduring hardship, it was about finding strength in others, trusting, and never giving up. The shuttle drifted through the stars. Leaving the dangers of Viralianine behind, Lyra and Ryan sat in quiet companionship, their bond stronger than ever. They had faced impossible odds together, used their combined knowledge and courage to survive, and come out stronger. Lyra realized something profound. The universe was vast, dangerous, and often indifferent. But with humans like Ryan, there was always hope. Courage and compassion were weapons just as powerful as shields or energy crystals. And sometimes, the right choice, at the right moment, could change everything. As they approached the distant planet that would serve as their next refuge, Lyra looked at Ryan and said softly, "Thank you for not giving up on me." Ryan smiled, a warmth in his eyes that matched the glow of the stars outside. "We don't give up. That's what makes us human." Lyra smiled back, feeling a spark of life and hope. For the first time since the crash, she believed that she could survive, thrive, and even find a new purpose in the universe, not alone, but with someone she could trust. Someone who had shown her the true power of compassion, courage, and humanity. And in that quiet shuttle, gliding through the endless stars, Lyra knew that the universe had more to offer than pain and loss. With humans by her side, anything was possible. The shuttle emerged from the chaos of Viralianine's asteroid fields, leaving behind the shattered world that had almost claimed Lyra's life. Ahead lay the vast expanse of space, dotted with stars, planets, and the faint glow of distant nebulae. For the first time in days, Lyra felt a sense of calm. She sat in the cabin, wrapped in her thermal blanket, watching Ryan work at the controls. His movements were precise, yet relaxed. The sign of someone who had survived countless challenges and had learned how to endure. Lyra's body was healing, her strength returning steadily. Her wounds, burns, and bruises were fading under Ryan's careful attention and the shuttle's medical systems. But more than that, her mind was healing. For the first time since the crash, she felt hope, a fragile but growing spark that lightened the weight of despair she had carried for so long. "You did it," she said softly, breaking the quiet. Her voice was calm, yet full of wonder. "You kept us alive." Ryan glanced at her, a small smile on his face. "We did it together," he said. "It's not just me." Lyra considered his words. In the past, she had survived battles alone, relying on her skills, her intelligence, and her instincts. But now, she realized that survival could be more than that. It could be about partnership, trust, and the willingness to act even when the odds seemed impossible. Humans like Ryan did not wait for others to act. They made choices, they took risks, and they protected life, even when it was easier to leave it behind. The shuttle's sensors picked up a nearby planet, one that could serve as a temporary refuge. Ryan plotted a course, adjusting the ship's trajectory to avoid unstable asteroid belts and lingering debris from the war. Lyra leaned over the console, helping him calculate the safest path. Her alien knowledge combined with Ryan's experience created a seamless partnership. For the first time, she felt like she belonged somewhere, not in her people's fleet. Not on a war-torn planet, but here beside someone who valued life and refused to give up. As they approached the planet, Lyra could see its surface through the shuttle's viewports. It was a calm world, with rolling green plains, shimmering lakes, and distant mountain ranges. It seemed untouched by war, a place where life could grow and thrive. She felt a sense of awe. The universe was vast and dangerous. It had also held beauty and possibility. Ryan guided the shuttle carefully through the atmosphere, avoiding turbulence and unpredictable weather patterns. Lyra watched, fascinated by his skill and calm under pressure. She had seen many pilots before, both human and alien, but none moved with the combination of experience, courage, and instinct that Ryan displayed. She realized that human determination was not reckless, as her people had claimed. It was precise, intelligent, and, most importantly, unyielding. The shuttle touched down gently on a flat, grassy plain near a small river. The engines powered down, leaving only the soft hum of the life support systems. Lyra exhaled, feeling the tension in her body release. They had made it. They were safe. Ryan helped her out of the shuttle. She stood on the planet's surface for the first time in days, feeling the warmth of the sun on her skin. The air was fresh, carrying the faint scent of flowers and water. Lyra closed her eyes, letting herself breathe deeply. For the first time since the crash, she felt alive, truly alive. This place, she said softly, it's beautiful. Ryan nodded, looking out over the landscape. It's a good place to rest, recharge, plan the next step. You've earned it. Lyra turned to him, gratitude shining in her eyes. I don't know how to thank you. You've saved me, guided me, and never let me give up. Ryan shrugged modestly, his eyes gentle. No thanks needed. That's what humans do. We fight for life, and we fight for others when we can. Sometimes that's all that matters. Lyra thought about his words. Humans had a strange kind of courage, not the kind that came from honor or power, but the kind that came from refusing to stop, refusing to abandon hope, and choosing to act even when the universe seemed determined to crush you. She had expected death, loneliness, and despair on Veralionine. Instead, she had found a human who showed her the power of life, compassion, and courage. Over the next few days, Ryan worked on repairing the shuttle and gathering supplies from the planet. Lyra assisted him eagerly, using her alien knowledge to optimize the ship's systems, improve efficiency, and even find ways to filter and purify the planet's water. She had survived by herself before, but now she realized that working alongside someone who cared made survival not only easier, but meaningful. At night, Lyra and Ryan sat beside a small fire they had made. Watching the stars stretch endlessly above, the universe seemed quiet and infinite. Yet in that quiet, Lyra felt something extraordinary. She had been abandoned, left to die, yet here she was, alive, safe, and learning about courage, resilience, and hope from a human. I never understood humans before, she admitted softly, her eyes reflecting the firelight. I thought you were reckless, primitive, sometimes dangerous. But now, I see something different. You care, you fight, you never give up. Ryan looked at her, a faint smile on his lips. We're not perfect. We make mistakes. But we try. That's what counts. And sometimes, the ones who survive, the ones who care, they make all the difference. Lyra nodded, letting his words sink in. She realized that her people, despite their technology and organization, had often lacked this simple courage, the courage to act, to protect, to hope. Humans were flawed, yes, but their heart, their determination, and their willingness to fight for life were remarkable. In the following days, Lyra began to move freely on the planet, exploring the rolling hills, the rivers, and the small forests. She discovered plants she had never seen before, creatures that were timid but curious, and a sense of peace she had never known. The planet felt alive, safe, and welcoming, a stark contrast to the war-torn worlds she had known. Ryan taught her more about human culture, philosophy, and the principles that guided their actions. Lyra listened intently, fascinated by the simplicity yet depth of human courage. Humans did not always act perfectly, but they acted with heart. They did not abandon life or hope lightly. And for Lyra, that was a lesson more valuable than any technology or knowledge she had acquired. One evening, as the twin suns set over the mountains, casting golden light across the plains, Lyra spoke quietly. "Ryan, may I ask something?" "Of course," he replied. "May I?" "Come with you. Not just for survival, but to learn, to see, to help." Her voice was tentative but hopeful. Ryan looked at her, his expression warm. "I thought you'd never ask." "Of course you can. We could use more light in the dark, someone to share the journey, someone who understands both worlds." Lyra's heart swelled. For the first time since her crash, she felt a sense of belonging. Not because of her people, not because of her home planet, but because of one human who had refused to let her die, who had shown her the power of courage, hope, and life itself. The stars above seemed to shine brighter that night. Reflecting the spark of life that had returned to Lyra, the universe was vast, dangerous, and unpredictable, but she no longer felt fear. She had learned that survival was not just about skill, strength, or technology. It was about courage, compassion, and the choices one made to protect life and hope as they prepared the shuttle for the next leg of their journey. Lyra stood beside Ryan, looking out at the horizon. She thought of the worlds they would explore, the challenges they would face, and the lives they might touch. And she felt ready, not just to survive, but to live fully, with purpose, courage, and hope. Ryan clapped his hands lightly, breaking the silence. "Ready to go?" Lyra nodded, smiling. "Ready?" Together, they boarded the shuttle. As it lifted off, leaving the peaceful planet behind, Lyra realized something profound. Humanity's strength was not in weapons, ships, or fleets. It was in the refusal to give up, and the courage to act, and in the willingness to care for others even when it was easier to turn away. And as the shuttle soared among the stars, Lyra felt a spark of hope and belonging she had never known. She had been abandoned, left to die on a distant world. But she had been saved, guided, and inspired by a human who showed her the light between stars, the light of courage, hope, and humanity. For the first time in her life, Lyra knew the universe was full of possibilities. She was no longer alone. She was alive, she was free, she was ready to face whatever lay ahead with humanity by her side. And in that knowledge, she whispered softly, "Maybe. Maybe humanity is what hope looks like." The stars stretched endlessly around them, cold yet beautiful, and Lyra felt a sense of wonder, courage, and determination. The journey was far from over, but for the first time, she believed that anything was possible. With humans like Ryan in the universe, life, hope, and compassion could shine even in the darkest corners of the galaxy.